Then the Spirit of the Lord came to Jephthah. He crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door to my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave him into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from the Arah to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel-Keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of timbrels? She was only a child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh no, my daughter! You have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites, but grant me this one request." She said, "Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry." "You may go," he said, and he let her go for 2 months. She and her friends went into the hills and wept because she would never marry. After 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite tradition that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite.
Hi. My name is Eidan, and my pronouns are they, them. A few things before we start. While the content of our passage today is domestic violence, I'm not going to be solving domestic violence, okay? Like, don't, I'm not going to be offering an interpretation that applies even explicitly to domestic violence today or in the context of you or those you love. Today, I make neither judgment nor recommendation for those areas of your life, because you and the Spirit of God within you are the experts in your own experience, and I honor that. I think that God does have a story for domestic violence, but I will be telling you mostly about a different story, and you'll see what I mean soon. And by the way, because no victim of violence should ever remain nameless, we will be naming the daughter in the story by the earliest name we've given her traditionally, which is Celia. Okay, to start off, I'm going to be reading the passage again with my own literalist janky translation. That's partly because it's hard to take it all in for the first time, and partly because I want you to hear the repetition of verbs and phrases that happens. Hebrew is like all about the repeating verbs in different contexts. You'll see what I mean. Okay. And the soul of Yahweh came upon Jephthah, and he passed over to Gilead and to Manasseh, and he passed over to Mizpah, Gilead, and from Mizpah, Gilead, he passed over to the sons of Ammon. And Jephthah vowed a vow to Yahweh, saying, "If you givingly give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then let it be that the going outward that goes out of my house to meet me in my return in peace from the sons of the Ammonites, let it be to Yahweh, I will offer it as a burnt offering." And Jephthah passed over the sons of Ammon to fight them, and Yahweh gave them into his hand, and he struck them from Aurora to the entrance of Minnith, 20 cities, a very big wound. And the sons of Ammon bent the knee before the face of the sons of Israel. Jephthah came home to his house at Mizpah, and look, his daughter is going out to meet him in timbrels and in dancing, and she was an only. Other than her, he had neither daughter nor son. And it was as he saw her, he tore his garments, and he said, "Alas, my daughter, you have bent the knee of me, and your life is one of those that troubles me. And I opened my mouth to Yahweh, and am not able to return." And she said to her father, "You opened your mouth to Yahweh. Do according to me, according to the opening from your mouth. After that which Yahweh did for you, avenged you from your enemy, the sons of Ammon." And she said to her father, "Abate from me 2 months to go down on the mountains, and I will weep on my virginity, I and my companions." And he said, "Go." And he said, he sent his daughter 2 months, and she and her companions, and wept on her virginity on the mountains. And so it was at the end of 2 months she returned to her father, and he did to her according to his vow that he had vowed. And she knew no man. And it became custom in Israel in the days of days. The daughters of Israel went out in memory of the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. We're used to talking about the almost sacrifice of Isaac. And we find that abhorrent and challenging and questionable. If you remember months ago, Guy did a whole sermon on trying to reconcile that scene with our understanding of God. And Isaac doesn't even die at the end, you know? Yet here we have this insignificant, unnamed girl that really does die, and God doesn't intervene, and everyone seems kind of fine with that. What the hell is going on? Like, how can we possibly move on from this? Well, what if I told you that there were some alternative readings of this story? Around the medieval period, monks and ascetics of both Judaism and Christianity held Celia as the example of those who eschew getting married and devote their lives to God. Let's look at the evidence for their reading. First of all, the Hebrew term for burnt offering does not literally mean a burnt offering. Well, it does, but it also refers to complete or irrevocable offerings, offerings that cannot be used by humans anymore because they are wholly devoted to the Lord. When it comes to inanimate objects or animals, that means they're broken or burned. But what that means for humans is a little more unclear. Usually when a human is dedicated to the Lord, it means that they grow up in the temple and serve God there, like how Hannah dedicated her son Samuel to the Lord and he became a priest. So maybe irrevocably dedicated is just a different term for the same thing. The text also emphasizes that Celia was an only child and that she was a virgin. She was Jephthah's only hope for propagating a name for himself, which is like really, really, really important. And if she was to never marry, that was a very serious sacrifice on Jephthah's part. If it was getting married that she was sacrificing, that would make sense for why she is mourning her virginity on the mountains, and not, like her life, which I feel like is more important. It's also not clear what exactly happened to Celia at the end. It just says, he did to her as he had vowed. In fact, because of how the sentence is structured, you can read it like this, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she knew no man. It also explains, perhaps, why she was so willing to do it. And she said to her father, "You opened your mouth to Yahweh. Do according to me to the opening from your mouth, after that which Yahweh did for you, avenged from your enemy, the sons of Ammon." Esther Fuchs, in her article Marginalization, Ambiguity, and Silencing, the Story of Jephthah's Daughter, notes that these words of Celia imply that she owes the same obedience to Jephthah as he owes to Yahweh. She is not only willing to obey her father, but also to justify him, which would be, so not okay if we were talking about child sacrifice. But, if we're talking about total dedication to the religious life, metaphorical sacrifice, then there's a nobility to that, isn't there? I was 14 or 15 at a Christian youth camp with my school, and we sat around this picnic table, and we, teenagers, girls, mostly pastors' kids, mostly eldest daughters, and we shared our favorite Bible verses. And the most popular one, if I'm recalling correctly, was Galatians 2:20. "I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." My favorite Bible verse at the time was Philippians 1:21. "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." They said, "Wow, that's just like a more macabre version of the same verse." I was hurt. My verse was just a more honest version of their verse. Maybe they weren't as dedicated as I am. They weren't as willing to admit the truth of the sacrifice God required as I am. I know what peace costs, and I'm willing to pay the price. I know what peace costs, and I'm willing to pay the price. The price. Mostly pastors' kids, mostly eldest daughters. And it's not death. Of course not. That would be evil. It's only like a death, but noble. It's noble because I am choosing to do it. Look how nobly I am dying. Look how calmly I cast off the parts of myself that don't fit. Look how gently I wrapped the unnamed one inside of me in butcher's paper and place it in a corner cupboard. We cannot bring that out here. This is the price of peace. You want peace, don't you? So we've saved Celia. Good job, everyone. Do we feel more comfortable with the text now? Do we feel more comfortable with our religion now? And she said to her father, "You opened your mouth to Yahweh, do to me according to your opening from your mouth, after that which Yahweh did for you, avenged from your enemy, the sons of Ammon." Her response to Jephthah is calm, measured. He's like, "Oh no, you're going to have to die." She's like, not like, "What?" She's like, yes. And when she has finished mourning, she obediently returns and does what is asked for her. Jephthah made a bargain for peace with the Ammonites, and the bargain was 2 very big wounds, one in the land of the Ammonites and one in the body of Celia. And so it was, at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her according to his vow that he had vowed. We want a peacemaking community, but what kind of peace? Whose peace? Whose sacrifice? Dr. Thema Bryant Davis says, "I was taught that keeping quiet kept the peace until I realized whose peace was it keeping. The offender is at peace. The people who don't want to deal with it are at peace. And I, in this little body, am holding all of the war." When I was about 12, I wrote in my journal, "When I grow up, I want to be a martyr." You guys don't know what it's like to be me. I decided the ideal age was 16. Young enough that I was still a child to tug on the heartstrings. I was really into 10 Girls Who Changed the World at the time. But old enough that people would know that I knew what I was doing. I know what I'm doing. I chose this. It's important that I chose this. It's important to me that Celia chose this. You know, her name isn't really Celia, right? An early church writer called Pseudo-Philo gave her that name in the 2nd century AD. If we give her a name, it's easier. We like to give people names. If we name her, we can say, "Well, what happened to Celia wasn't that bad, actually. I had a look into it, and it's fine. Check the Hebrew, it's fine." From a literary and historical perspective, Jephthah is clearly the main character in the story, but it's okay, because Celia doesn't get all that bad an outcome from it either. She's okay. We're okay. But there are a lot of people that aren't named Celia. And there are a lot of people who aren't named Jephthah too, who more than anything else were trying to do the right thing, even if it hurt them or others, seemingly impossible situations that nobody knows how to look in the face. When I write myself into this story, I see myself as both of them. Palestinian poet Marwan Markour says, "In order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. And in order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent." I think we're trying to save Celia. Okay, I'll be real. I think I'm trying to save Celia for 2 reasons. Number 1, I cannot bear to see other people suffering, especially for my religion. I don't want to see it. And therefore, I will avoid seeing it, even when it is there. I want to save Celia, but even if we can somehow scoop her out of the text and tuck her away in a monastery with books and a little vegetable garden, when we turn back to the text, Jephthah's daughter is still there, dying again on the words of an oath to Yahweh. And I don't even know her name. And let's pluck that Jephthah's daughter out, and we'll call it Iphigenia. And we'll say, well, in this case, she was sacrificed, but it was noble, and she consented to it, so it's okay. And then we turn back, and there's another one, and we call this one Timothy, and we say, oh, well, God was teaching him something in this one, so that's okay. And you turn back, and there's another one, and I'm gonna do this with this Jephthah's daughter, and the next Jephthah's daughter, and this Jephthah's daughter, and see how good I am at defending Yahweh? I will justify every unjust deed. I will save every unnamed one of us, one justification at a time. This is the second reason I am trying to save Celia. I need Celia's suffering to be holy and noble and important, because then my suffering is holy and noble and important. And I need my suffering to be holy and noble and important, because then otherwise, what was the point? We make the suffering palatable by making it religious. Oh, you say, God is teaching me something. God wasn't teaching Celia anything. Oh, it was a sacrifice for peace. What sort of peace? What sort of peace requires your death? You know our religion only requires one death, right? And even if your death, physical, metaphorical, did bring a kind of peace, it wouldn't be the kind of peace I want, because I want peace with you. I want peace with you in it, and I want both of us to be alive to see it. See, this sermon is about the family of God. Judith called this service a service of lament, and she's right. And there's a word in verse 40 that often gets translated lament. The daughters of Israel went out to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. To lament, to commemorate, even to celebrate, because the word literally means to recount, to tell the story of. A translation for our context might be truth-telling. We do not make ourselves a community of peace by hiding Jephthah's daughter, or reframing Jephthah's daughter, or glorifying Jephthah's daughter. We make ourselves a community of peace by telling the truth about her. So here are some truths. Jephthah's daughter is dead. I do not know her name, but I remember her. There is a very big wound in our land. I do not know the language that was born on this land, but I remember that there was a language. I remember that there were people who spoke that language. I do not know their names either. Peacemaking requires the whole body. We are communities that refuse to be uncomfortable with wounds. I will bring my whole self to my community because I want my community to bring their whole selves to me. Our hands are full of blood. We are bleeding. Both of these are true, and we will do the work anyway. A peacemaking community is a truth-telling community, and I trust you to be able to know what that is for you. And when I gave up on becoming a martyr, I decided to be a prophet. When Jesus had again crossed by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered round him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone has touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that her healing could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Daughter, go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just believe, and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go with him except Peter and John and James and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Jesus said, "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Pray with me. Our God, it's really important to me that you hold every story that I cannot fit in my little brain, that you remember all of the names, all of the stories, that you don't need them to have reasons or meanings because they already have people in them who are beautiful and glorious and made in your image. And those stories are important not because they make sense or because they were meaningful or because they were worth it, but because those people themselves are worthy and beautiful and important. We do not desire to make a community that cannot face those who have died, those who are dying. We do not desire a religion that involves us killing parts of ourselves because they do not fit the ways we have promised to fit. We want a peace that has all of us in it. We need your help. We need your healing. Teach us how to have that peace, to see all of one another, and to love. Amen.